Dame, gospodo, želim vam srdačno dobrodošlicu. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome this afternoon from the British-Serbian Chamber of Commerce, wherever you are listening to us from, our members and our guests, including, I believe, some members of the Foreign Investors Council in Belgrade. You're all very welcome. And I'm David Lansman. I'm the chairman of the British-Serbian Chamber of Commerce. Well, the clue's in the name. We exist for our members to help them increase Serbian-British trade in both directions. We aim to support our members individually and with our shared interests. We are now part of the British Chambers of Commerce International Network, and we've recently also become a chamber member of the FIC, the Foreign Investors Council in Serbia. And of course, we also have extremely good and close regular relationship with the Privredna Komora Serbia, the Chamber of Commerce, Serbian Chamber of Commerce. So if you're a member, I hope we are serving you well. Do let us know how we can help you. If you're not a member already, this is your first opportunity. Please do join us. And if we can't help you direct with every question, we'll certainly know somebody who can. Well, we all know what the biggest issue facing us all around the world is at the moment. But for anybody who's doing business in the UK or with the UK, I fear it's still Brexit that comes a very close second. As a chamber, we believe that there are huge opportunities in the time to come, as both our countries, as Serbia and Britain, are actively seeking to widen their international business connections and to exploit the opportunities. But there's no doubt that with the end of the transition period coming at the end of this year, there's a hurdle to get over first. As far as the UK and Serbia are concerned, of course, the business that we've done between our two countries over the past few years has been done under an EU agreement. But now that the UK is going to be fully outside the EU from the end of this year, and Serbia is not a member of the WTO, the World Trade Organization, the priority is undoubtedly for the two countries to maintain the trading relationship that they already have and get a continuation agreement concluded to roll over the existing arrangements just as soon as we can. That, I would say, should be a first step towards even closer relationship in the future. For obvious and understandable reasons, the pandemic on the one hand and the Serbian elections earlier in the year on the other, the negotiations on that continuation agreement have of course yet to take place. That's a pity, particularly since the UK has already signed a great number of these agreements, including with some other countries in the region. So I'm absolutely sure I speak for all the members of our chamber in saying that we will strongly urge both governments to negotiate and reach an agreement just as soon as possible. It should be very straightforward, and there's absolutely no time to lose. Now, unfortunately, we're not there yet, so today's discussion is intended very much to discuss where we are, what are the options for business in a little over 2 months' time, depending on what happens or what doesn't happen with the diplomacy in the meantime. We've got three excellent speakers to cover the whole range of issues. I'll introduce them to you in order of appearance. They'll speak for a few minutes each, and then at the end we'll take questions and comments. I would really encourage everybody to share your experiences and views with us. By all means ask questions, but if you've got personal experience too that you can share with us, that will be really valuable in helping us to explain, understand and articulate our views to the two governments and to anyone else who's interested. There's a chat function on Zoom, as I'm sure you've all become very used by now already. Please put your questions in throughout the talks, and at the end we will come to you in turn. We'll unmute you and you can ask your question in turn if you want to, or we'll have the question on Zoom. So please be thinking of your questions as we go through. So let me now introduce our speakers to you. First of all, Dr. Anna Jerzewska. Anna is a globally recognized customs and international trade advisor. She's got a combination of commercial, policy and academic experience. And in recent years, she's been working with the United Nations International Trade Center, the British Chambers of Commerce, I mentioned we're a member of the British Chambers of Commerce, and many businesses and governments. And she is an associate fellow of a very well-respected organization in the UK, the Trade Policy Observatory. After Anna, we'll hear from Richard. Richard Robinson is our Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce based in Belgrade. He's had extensive experience with Chambers of Commerce. He was the General Director of the British Chamber of Commerce in the Czech Republic. And he's even run for Parliament in Britain on 2 occasions. He's a chartered accountant by training and has had a number of business roles across Europe. Finally, we will hear from Mišo Bozić. Mišo is Managing Director of De La Mode Balkans, a logistics company and part of Expediator PLC, which is a UK-quoted logistics business. And he's got over 10 years experience in transportation, trucking and logistics. So he will give us a very practical picture of what needs to happen. So with no further ado, and with a reminder, please put your questions in chat as soon as you have them. I will turn over to Anna for her presentation. Anna, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll give you a bit of an overview of what's happening and where we are with Brexit negotiations. Whenever I do these kind of presentations, it's quite shocking in a way that not really a lot has changed in what I'm able to say, and we're basically saying the same thing now as we did about a year ago. Not to mention that a lot of the things are still uncertain the same way they were 4 years ago. So it is quite it's quite surprising where we are in many ways. But first of all, in terms of talks, in terms of the kind of political process or about regarding the future relationship and whether or not we'll have a deal, that obviously is something that's incredibly political at this point, as it has been for the last 4 years. We know, I think we've heard today that the deadline of the 15th of October, that's already not realistic. That's not something that we expected to happen. So chances are, if we do end up getting a deal, and by the way, I still believe we will end up getting a deal, that will happen at some point, possibly end of October, November, with the text available perhaps towards end of November, beginning of December. And I'll come in a second to how that impacts companies. We know that there are still some points of contention, points where 2 sides don't agree. Some of them include fisheries, level playing field, as well as things that are more in kind of, in my area, in the area of customs, such as rules of origin. That's very critical and very basic aspect of a free trade agreement. There's no agreement on that in any way, shape or form. And there's still some areas of that process that are very much, where the 2 sides very much disagree. So there's still a lot to do. And while there are proposals and work being done kind of away from the headlines, there's still a lack of agreement. And that's the kind of the high level political process, but kind of in a way separate from that, there's another process taking place, and this is getting the UK ready for the 1st of January. Because whatever happens, whether we end up having a deal or we will end up in a no deal scenario, there will be a new border in place. There will be actually 2 borders, because we have the Northern Ireland, which is slightly separate, and a different border. So with borders obviously comes paperwork and processes and formalities and so on. So a separate process from deciding what the future relationship will look like is making sure that we're remotely ready for the 1st of January. And this is one of the areas where things are not going the way they should be, and we're really not where we should be at this point, given that we're middle of October. On so many different levels, we have government readiness and the fact that we still now do not have sufficient information for traders to be ready and to prepare. We are still awaiting crucial bits of information. Even something such as tariffs, the UK's third-party tariffs that they were published, I believe, in May or June. I believe that was definitely several months ago. They were published as the final version of the tariff. We now know that that might not be the case. So we now know that there still might be updates to the tariff, if not to the entire tariff, that at least in some product codes. That's again cutting it extremely close, given that that companies are planning ahead and ordering, and nothing in the private sector happens overnight. So that is again something that we really should have had weeks or months ago. But even in terms of just simple processes and procedures for the border, we have a version, the latest version of the border operating model for the EU-UK border that was published last week. But that's again still not the final version. So even the information we are getting, they're not in their final version, and companies are still waiting for basic information. Things like applying for a duty deferment account, applying for simplification. The UK government has introduced simplifications for the first 6 months, meaning that companies that do not wish to complete their declarations at the border and wish to take advantage of the simplified procedures can do so, and can provide minimal information at the border and then provide a supplementary declaration, import declaration 6 months later. Even that, we still don't know how companies need to apply for that. This is still not live. There are still questions, unanswered questions from the government side. So there's quite a lot that the government still needs to do and still need to provide that hasn't been done. There's this sense in the UK government that information is only provided when it's complete, when it's ready, and it's been kind of approved by all involved parties. But that means that that's really last minute, and very often, because of the need for secrecy that the UK government seems to have, this, by the time it's published as a final version or one of the versions, it hasn't really been discussed with the industry or with the relevant stakeholders, causing stakeholders to be caught off guard or have questions that they possibly should have been involved in answering. So I think one of the things that the UK government is doing right now is, before they publish everything, the same was with the border operating model last week, send it to relevant stakeholders, get their input and so on. But again, that's very, very late in the game for this kind of approach. Then we have traders themselves, and we know traders are not ready. We know that a number of traders, I think there was a survey last week that said that around 50% of traders still think that there will be some sort of a extension, some sort of additional transition period, implementation period, call it whatever you will, but that the 1st of January won't be the actual deadline. And it's not really surprising, given that we already had 2 false Brexit deadlines. So it's if you're a company, there are good reasons to think that. Unfortunately, if that's not the case, and doesn't seem like that would be the case, these companies have very little time left to prepare. There's a lot of companies that still don't understand what's expected of them. One of the issues here is that for the longest time, the UK guidance basically talked about the need for a trader to register and obtain an EORI number, so a trader registration number, and get themselves a broker. And that was pretty much it. There wasn't this message sent by the government to say that as a trader, you are responsible for everything that's being traded on your behalf, in your name. So I don't think that companies really got that message, that at the end of the day, everything falls on them. All the information they provide, all the decisions are made by them. So that's one of the issues, is that the fact that companies are just not aware of the difficulties they will face and how much depends on them. The other thing is we obviously had COVID, and that's been a massive impact on a number of companies. Companies that spent the last year struggling to survive have obviously not been focusing on Brexit because they had more pressing issues. And that, unfortunately, this happened in 2020, which was the year where a lot of companies waited to prepare to do any sort of assessment, Brexit readiness assessment, until the 2020, because of the uncertainty that we had for the first 3 years. So towards the end of 2019, if you remember, we got the withdrawal agreement. We started at the beginning of 2020. We actually left. And then we started discussing the future relationship. So from that moment onwards, we kind of had a bit more of a rough idea what the future relationship might look like and when things will happen. So for a number of companies, again, due to the uncertainty, 2020 was the year to prepare. And then with the pandemic, that all went completely southward. So with that, you have three things happening in December, January. You have obviously Brexit and potential day one. You have potentially second wave and a second wave of COVID restrictions, and you have one of the busiest periods in retail, Christmas time. So this is not a very good combination for traders, especially for traders who have not done anything until now to get ready. Then the kind of third part of this readiness triangle are hauliers and customs brokers, the industry, the service providers that will support and facilitate communication between traders and the government. And here, I think it's less of a lack of readiness issue, because these companies know what's happening. They've been, especially the ones that have experience with imports and exports, not just trading with the EU, and the ones that have clients that don't have that experience. So companies that work with clients who have never imported and exported, and therefore have no idea where to begin. So I think these companies are very aware what the difficulties will be. For them, there were two problems. One of them is, again, not getting information from the government. Hauliers, customs brokers, they're still sending, raising alarm bells, sending open letters and so on, requesting more information and commenting on, for example, the difficulties with the IT systems, the number of new IT systems that the UK government introduced to manage that border, as well as basic information such as tariffs. But here, even bigger problem is just the lack of capacity, and just the fact that we don't have enough of these service providers, both in terms of hauliers, although here the change is slightly less dramatic, because obviously the volume of trade remains more or less the same. We'll see, but that's in principle it doesn't change drastically. But it's the type of service that you provide. So a haulier that provides freight forwarding services will also now potentially be required to provide additional services, and that's where problems begin. So we don't have enough customs people. We don't have enough of them in the market to hire them in the first place. The grants that the UK government issued to help businesses and service providers to prepare and train people, they have not been as effective as expected. So again, the problem here is just lack of capacity in the industry. So if you think of it, in kind of, to sum it up, you have traders that don't really know what they need to do and what they're expected to do. You have service providers who could potentially help traders, but there's not enough of them, and they're under extreme pressure to deal with the uncertainty. And then you have the government who's not ready, and the border that's very much not ready, with basic processes still not decided and lacking. Even something as simple as transit, and coming back to impact on companies, but not non-EU companies. So for example, companies in Serbia, I talked to a lot of companies here in Switzerland. Transit, something like transit. If you send goods to the UK under transit, how do you discharge transit in the UK? We've only now, last week, with the new border operating model, got some idea where transit discharge offices and points of exit will be located in the UK. That's 2.5 months before the deadline. That's, in order to plan routes, plan supply chains, that's incredibly late. So again, the situation isn't, we're not where we're supposed to be, and that has a very tangible impact on companies, not only in the UK and the EU, but third countries as well. Anyone that trades with the UK, with Northern Ireland, with with these jurisdictions will be impacted one way or another. So we even something as simple as developing countries that trade with the UK and want to continue to trade with the UK under the generalized scheme of preferences, so the preference system for developing countries. Even there, we don't have enough information to advise companies in these countries as to what they need to do for the 1st of January. So overall, I think the picture, and I'm happy to take questions on any of that, but I think that the overall picture is we're really not in a good shape at the moment. And whenever you speak to a haulier, a customs broker, a company, the general atmosphere here in the UK is that of significant concerns and panic even, and still a very strong kind of lack of understanding between the private sector and the public sector. So when you speak to the government, they don't quite understand why the private sector hasn't been getting ready. They were told they were going to have an FTA or no deal, so they should have gotten ready. They should have been able to prepare. And the business obviously needs practical information on a completely different level. So there's still this disconnect between the private and the sector and the public sector. I'll stop here. Again, there's quite a lot of things to unpack, quite a lot of areas where there's still a lot of uncertainty. I'm happy to take questions on that, but yeah, I think I'll stop now as a, unfortunately, that's not, we're not starting on a very positive note here. I don't unfortunately have much to say that's really reassuring, but this is where we are. Thank you.
Anna, thank you very much indeed. I'd like to be able to say thank you for cheering us up, but I'm not quite sure I can say that. But thank you for posing the questions, which I desperately hope our next two speakers are going to be able to answer. But we'll come back, no doubt, to plenty of questions at the end. And at this point, moving through from the general kind of British Brexit conundrum to the British-Serbian relationship and what that amounts to, I'll turn to Richard. Thank you.
As Anna has cheered us up with the wider context, I shall, well, I was going to say confine my remarks. I'll endeavour not to make us too much, too more miserable over the circumstances of UK-Serbian trade. But frankly, for most of this year, the future of Serbian-UK trade has been covered in a fog of uncertainty. What I'm going to do is try and explain where I think we are, what I think might happen, and what steps the British-Serbian Chamber of Commerce is planning to take. Let's start with the basics. We left, the UK left the EU on the 31st of January this year, and the transition period began and carries on to the end of this year. Now, in practice, that means that there's no change to the trading arrangements as the EU Stabilisation and Association Agreement applies during the whole of the transition period. But from the 1st of January this next year, the Stabilisation and Association Agreement will no longer cover the UK, but of course it remains for the EU 27 and Serbia. One other thing that remains unaffected is the UK-Serbia Investor Protection Treaty. That actually was a UK-Yugoslav treaty signed in 2002, I think. Either way, it's unaffected. It's not an EU treaty. It's not covered. So anybody who has investments and has been relying on the Investor Protection Treaty to reduce their risk can continue to rely on it. Now, in parallel with the negotiations between the UK and the EU, the UK is negotiating what they're calling continuity trade agreements with all countries that have an association agreement with the EU. The purpose of the CTA, as it's often known as, is to protect the current arrangements and to avoid change or minimize change. It's not a traditional trade agreement, and it's not designed to improve or improve terms of trade and improve either tariff or non-tariff barriers. I think probably best to think of it as a copy and paste agreement, if you like. This is because the UK has to sign so many of these trade agreements quickly, ideally so they were all to come into effect on the 1st of January next year. However, as David has already commented, the Serbian CTA is, shall we say, well, basically hasn't started. They were the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, as it now is, was supposed to negotiate with the Serbian Ministry of Trade and started in the second half of March. But for obvious reasons, the first round of negotiations was cancelled. people have with trying to keep themselves safe. And it's been further postponed every time they've tried to start it up by, first of all, the Serbian parliamentary elections, and significantly the lack of a Serbian government since. And frankly, until the new Serbian Minister of Trade is appointed, there is no way that the Serbians can actually allow the start of negotiations, even though it's clear that the ministry itself would like to start. So meanwhile, as David said, the UK has been negotiating as many of these continuity trade agreements elsewhere, and one of the first to be signed was with Kosovo. I also think that Bosnia and Herzegovina, the CTA for them, is likely to be ready before the year end. So yeah, it's we have just 2.5 months to negotiate, sign and ratify the UK-Serbian continuity trade agreement, which, shall we say, is a challenge. And it's made, I think, a little bit worse because the EU Stabilisation and Association Agreement has a fair amount of political language that isn't just around trade. It's further complicated, as David has said, because Serbia isn't a member of the World Trade Organization. And I think that's just down to, they were 95% of the way there, but there's an issue that remains about genetically modified organisms. So, and that's not going to change in the near future. So if we don't, realistically, we're not going to have a continuity trade agreement in time for the 1st of January next year. I suspect realistically, the best we can hope for is a good start to negotiations by the year end, with completion as soon as feasible in 2021. And on top of that, if the negotiations are going reasonably well, I think it's fair to make an assumption, a working assumption, that sort of the agreement is there not to change things. Therefore, if there's goodwill on both sides, neither of them will make any changes in the meanwhile time, so as not to undermine the negotiations. But we remain with a lack of any framework, leading to a lack of protection and increased uncertainty. And the longer the negotiations continue, the greater the risk. I suspect that the risk will be greater for UK exports to Serbia than Serbian exports to the UK, principally because, well, Serbia's only got one continuity trade agreement to worry about, whereas the UK has, what, 40, and is not going to mess around introducing, particularly as Anna was explaining with all the detail that need to be produced. They're not going to mess around with anything particular to Serbia. I suppose the other risk is the impact of all the new procedures and requirements at the UK border, particularly at the Dover-Calais, leading to delays, particularly immediately after the new, in January. I guess it'll be worse if there's no deal, though I defer to Anna's analysis that there probably will be a deal. But I think that the most good, deferring to Anna again, but I would suspect that the particular area that that will get mostly affected, as well as by the processes, is that there will be additional, as far as Serbia is concerned, there'll be additional checks on animal products and I think plant products for transit goods, as far as I understand it, but I'm no customs specialist, so I'm sure that I will be corrected by either of the other speakers. But this is clearly something that the British-Serbian Chamber of Commerce needs to take act on. We believe that our members are best served by the resolution of all this uncertainty as quickly as possible. We're here to facilitate and encourage trade between our two countries, and at the first stage, it's got to be trying to maintain what we currently have. So I think that our initial aim is to push the new Serbian government to prioritize the continuity trade agreement. I know that the UK government is keen to get this sorted as quickly as possible, but we're pushing both and will continue to do so. And I think that we will have, once the first round of negotiations happens, I think we'll have a good idea whether it's going to go smoothly or whether some of the extraneous political issues are going to be a complication. I really sort of don't know either way. Both are possible. So what we're doing is we're already working with the Serbian Chamber of Commerce, the PKS, pressing both governments separately and together, and we will shortly be sort of putting something in the public domain, again, raising making it clear the importance to all our members of both organizations that the Serbian government can't ignore the issue. I plan to do something similar with the FIC, so hopefully we will get some publicity here in Serbia and a message across to the government here that they have to put the effort into sorting this out as quickly as possible. Secondly, as David said, we absolutely want to listen to the views and the issues relating to our members, and this briefing is part of that. We are a member-based organization, we listen to members, and actually the more detail and examples we have, the easier it is to make the case of its importance. So please, even if you don't have any questions here and now, please don't hesitate to contact me at the Chamber with your views or comments or examples or difficulties, and we will follow it up. Finally, I'll just say I'm not a logistics specialist, as David made clear. So I'll leave the discussion and advice to possible courses of action and mitigation to Mišo and Anna. But if you haven't, what I'd say is if you haven't started planning for all this, you should do so now. So thank you for listening.
Richard, thank you very much for that background and that information. And also thank you, perhaps I should say at this point, for organising today's seminar. You've obviously picked the right subject. I wish you could have picked a subject which is a little bit lighter and with a little bit more good news. I did like to inject a little ray of sunshine, including the one that's coming from behind me here in my house here in London. But I do think we are pushing at an open door in terms of a willingness on both sides to get these negotiations now underway. It's no one's fault they've been delayed. And certainly the latest news I hear is that we are pushing at an open door. There is that readiness to negotiate. There has been some work gone into this. We've got to keep pushing. It will be so much easier if this can be finished or as close to possible to finished before the end of the year. So we really must get on with it. But Richard, like Anna before, you have posed a lot of problems, and I'm desperately hoping Mišo has all the answers to them, at least as far as our members and business is concerned. So I think it's over to Mišo to hear what we do about all this. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It was a great pleasure to hear the opinion of Anna and Richard. Yes, every situation like Brexit, where you have significant change on the market, there is always risk and there is always opportunity. That is how I like to look on the situation. What I would like to first mention as someone who is on the field with the trade and with logistics is actually that are some figures about transportation with UK and EU. At this moment, 75% of freight is transported by the sea, and it's including also the trucks on the ferry, and 25% of goods are transported through Channel Tunnel. So Port of Dover, as far as I have information, reached its 100 capacity in 2014 already. Other ports are not so occupied, but it is something that will also have an effect. And when we speak about trade, EU 27 with the UK, more than 95% of vehicles entering in the UK are foreign registered vehicles. What we definitely mentioned before and what we all know is that Brexit is a growing source of uncertainty for the companies. And the reason for uncertainty is actually because most of the companies don't know exactly how it will look, so they don't have opportunity to prepare. What we can look in this situation is Croatia joining EU, and then you will have opposite situation in this with the Brexit. Customs procedures will definitely be something that will now be implemented for the trade between EU and UK. So it will definitely in practice mean that it will increase time for the transportation and logistics operations, and it will increase costs per shipment or per transport. Whether we like it or we don't like it, even the small increase of the time and loss of the time on the border or on the customs will increase the costs, and also just introducing of the customs operations for every transport will mean that there will be additional costs for the service that is provided for those shipments. Goods and supplies will be, most of the companies will need to increase the stocks for their own purposes, because they will not be, they don't have a security for the transport like they had till now. And customs warehouses will be something that will be introduced on the market. And since UK is is in EU for a long period, for the trade, especially for the small shipments and groupage services, you don't have to use customs bonded warehouse. Now for the groupage trucks that will depart from the UK or enter in the UK, you will need to have, you will need definitely to have customs procedures, and sometimes you cannot do everything on the truck. So it means that you will need to do the customs procedures in the warehouse. And one also potentially big impact will be on the e-commerce, because now most of the small businesses or the big companies doing the online sales and deliveries for the parcels now will have customs procedures for the parcels that value has probably, for example, in Serbia we have like 100 euros, so it can go through postal service. And now in UK and between the UK and EU, you can do it for much higher amounts. When you leave EU, then the UK will definitely have decrease for parcels and e-commerce services. When we speak about Serbia, I agree with Richard and Anna that we need to sign agreement as soon as possible. That is something that is definitely, because we have to keep the preferential origin for the trade. Otherwise, the goods from Serbia to UK will become, because of the tariffs, will become more expensive, and vice versa. When we speak about customs procedures, it will not change significantly because Serbia is outside of the EU, and it will not change for all the countries that are actually outside of the EU. And we can use the model of trade between Serbian procedure between Serbia and UK, for example, for the new procedures that will be implemented for the trade with the EU and UK. But what is great risk for the trade and what will increase the prices of transportation are actually the delays that will definitely occur on the border and on the ports. It will not change overall procedure for the trade between Serbia and UK with the documents, with everything, but it will change the transit time, which will eventually affect with the increases of the prices for the transportation. As you mentioned, not everything has to be bad in this situation. In trade of Serbia and the UK, Now, when UK is outside of EU, UK will have definitely opportunity to sign new trade agreements that till now were actually agreements that should be complied with the EU. But in the future, those agreements can be made with third-party countries, and which will bring trilateral agreements where Serbia could use those agreements for the new exports, or that UK could use those agreements, for example, to export to Russia or third-party countries. And yes, one more thing, since Serbia is the country that is outside of EU, and all the international trade is done with customs formalities, there is a potential that Serbian workforce here that is well known with the customs procedures could be potentially used for the outsourcing of customs operations in the Serbia. And I'm sure that some countries in Eastern Europe can be used also to, because especially, for example, Croatia, where you still have people that have knowledge with the customs procedures, can be used for outsourcing and to help lack of workforce for the customs formalities in the UK. That is all from me now.
Mišo, thank you very much. I'm glad you have some answers, though I don't think I think no one has all the answers right now. Well, let us turn to some questions, and I wonder if I could just start with one that's intriguing me for Anna, and that is, there's been some talk about, if there isn't a deal, I know you are quietly confident there may be one, but if there isn't one, that there might be some mini deals on specific areas to tide us over. Are we being over optimistic about all this sort of thing? Because as you rightly pointed out, a lot of people still really can't believe it's all going to happen. But do you think there's a fair expectation that something will indeed happen, and that things will be a bit smoother by the end of the year, or is that it's all or nothing?
So I think that depends on what kind of mini deals we're talking about here. I think there was a headline, I think 2 days ago, around the EU side being interested in several mini deals. I think a lot of people confuse them with sectoral deals, which obviously is not the case, because that's not really WTO compliant, and that's not really how these deals are done. If we're talking about some sort of arrangement like the ones we've been talking about over the last 4 years to enable planes to fly and the basic things like that, I think that might happen, the kind of, or hauliers to trade or things like that. But that will only happen for the basic, really necessary areas. I don't think if there's no deal, there's no deal. The other point is, and I think that was also clear from the other two presentations, that yes, there's some, in terms of what happens at the border and in terms of impact on non-EU traders, whether or not there is a deal, I don't think that really changes that much as in terms of what actually happens at the border. If you have a queue or if you have a line at the border, that's not because of the deal or no deal, it's because of a new customs border. So not sure whether this will necessarily be that important for traders from outside the EU that are, for example, trading under transit and get stuck behind a number of traders that need to present their documents. If you have a deal, then obviously we also have rules of origin, which is an additional document, an additional piece of paperwork the companies need to provide. One thing that we've not talked about yet, that I guess it could be you could say a silent hope in terms of what the companies are hoping for, and a lot of business association chambers of commerce, I think as well, British Chambers of Commerce and other chambers of commerce have come out in support of this, is a potential implementation period. So if we do end up with a deal, is to have some period between when the deal is published and when it actually comes into force. That might help. That's something that would be really, really needed at this point, where, for example, let's say rules of origin don't apply, or everything stays the way it is for a couple of months, just to give traders and everyone else a chance to read the deal if it comes out in December.
Yes, it's a very good point. I mean, one has to read the deal. It's not going to be a single-sided paper. It's going to be quite complicated. So I'm sure there's plenty to read. I see we have one question. At least I have access to one question. Maybe there are other questions. I don't know how we should proceed with this. Richard, what should we do? Should I read the question? Should I invite
Would Alex maybe asking Alexander to ask his question?
Be great. Alexander Dobromirov, would you like to ask your questions, which look absolutely to the point? Please do.
Hello, I'm contacting you from Novi Sad, Serbia. I'm doing business in corporate structures, and many of my clients are involved with the UK clients and have some holding structures. And there is a I'm following the news, and there is a speculation and questions. Is UK going to stay in the EU VAT system? Because if not, it's going to further complicate. So that would be the first question. And then also maybe I can ask all three, and then you will see. And also there was, in terms of corporate taxation, I read in several news that it may happen that the UK may lower corporate tax, which would be very interesting for boosting UK businesses and attracting foreign business. And also a double tax agreement. It's inherited with from Yugoslavia made double tax agreement with the UK, and now it's I don't want to say it's obsolete, but it's outdated, and there are many new issues, new businesses, and I don't think it's covered. And since you probably have also connections on both sides of the government, and as a Chamber of Commerce, is there a possibility that the governments of Serbia and UK may sign a new updated this double tax agreement, which would also, as Mr. Mišo said, it would possibly ease transfer of workforce and whatever. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. 3 questions there. Please don't say the double taxation agreement is out of date, because I spent many happy hours of my life involved in the continuation of that agreement once upon a time. But no, I'm sure it is. 3 questions: VAT, corporate tax, and double taxation agreement. Who would like to say anything about any of those? Any volunteers?
I'm happy to answer about the corporation tax and the double tax, but I don't know anything about the EU, the UK VAT system. Perhaps Anna might have a better view. In terms of corporation tax, I think if you'd asked even 6 months ago that the Treasury, UK Treasury, might have been keen to lower corporation tax for exactly this reason. However, with the huge amounts of money that have been spent in the last 6 months supporting the UK economy, at the moment there's lots of talk, if not immediately, that there are going to have to be significant tax rises over in the next few years to pay for the hundreds of billions of pounds that have been spent to support the economy in COVID. I think there's therefore political pressure that there's no way that direct taxes can be, particularly income taxes, can be increased, and politically they're not going to be able to reduce corporation tax for that reason. Just the political presentation is going to be dreadful. I think the best you can hope for is that the current government will do its best not to increase corporation tax in the UK. And even then, I think as have been reductions over the last, in the last 8 years or so, that you may find that some of those reductions are reversed. I haven't heard about anything to do with the revision of the double tax agreement. My guess is that there's probably a recognition in both tax authorities that it is out of date, but given all the other agreements that are more higher up the list of priorities, not least, of course, the continuity trade agreement, that actually this whole issue of negotiating capacity is just going to mean that it doesn't get addressed in the next few years. I'm perfectly happy to follow this up as a chamber issue if you want to contact me afterwards, and we can go from there. But I wouldn't hold out much hope in the short term.
Richard, I fear that's fair, but I think absolutely the chamber can pursue that.
I will certainly pursue it on both sides.
I think it depends on how much work is involved and so on, but we can certainly pursue that.
Again, more detail. If you want to drop me some lines with more details, your particular concerns, I will at least follow it up with the tax authorities without any promise.
Thank you. Anna, can you tell us anything about the UK and the VAT regime after Brexit fully implemented?
So yeah, as far as I know, no on the UK staying in the EU VAT regime. I understand that Northern Ireland stays in the UK EU VAT regime for obvious reasons. But just to add like one sentence on the corporate tax, this is very interesting because I'm not entirely. I completely see what Richard is saying. I'm just because there is this pressure on raising taxes and COVID and recovery and so on. But there's also all the promises that the UK government has given the British public over the 4 years of. That's why there's this whole issue around level playing field and stay date, is that the UK government has promised that we're leaving the EU so that we can control our own regulation, our own taxes, and give our companies the competitive edge that they deserve. So that's going to be a hard promise to keep at this under this COVID-related pressure. So I guess that's one to watch. But I think there will be pressure to do something. And obviously we have the discussion around free ports, introducing the 10 wonderful free ports, where one of the incentives will be lower taxes and tax incentives. But again, that's a very interesting situation for the UK government to be in at the moment. Unfortunately, I don't know nothing about I don't know anything about the double tax agreement, so can't comment on that.
Anna, thank you very much. So on the VAT side, the UK, other than Northern Ireland, will have its own VAT regime. And I do recall the British government saying that it wasn't going to abandon VAT for a different system, but it will be a UK-only system rather than an EU system.
That's the understanding, and again, I'm not a VAT expert, but from VAT colleagues, I understand that they're also very.
Sorry,
Alexander, if you could mute yourself.
No, sorry.
Thank you. So from VAT colleagues, I understand that they're also awaiting the basic information on the VAT form and how the form will look like. So for example, when you have right now acquisition tax, when you import something or you acquire something in the EU, you have the box for acquisition VAT. How is that going to look like now? So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we have a question on the chat side from Dobrivoje Milanovic. Would you like to ask your question to the panel, please? Alex, have we unmuted Mr. Milanovic?
Oh, thank you. Do you hear me now?
We do.
Oh, okay.
No, you're muted again.
Now?
Yes.
Yep.
Hear me?
That's
Yeah.
great.
Okay. Something is repeating. Yeah. So once again, maybe specific question, but it could fall on between the chairs if we are not careful. So a lot of companies, including my own, is operating with the UK products, but through the intermediary warehouses all over the EU. For instance, what happens if you are trying to import a product produced in the UK, but then custom cleared in Hungary and then imported to Serbia? In that case, due to some, I would say, bureaucratical reasons, not because of the intention on any sides, you lose the preferential status. I'm afraid that this could happen. And we talked about this with the Trade Department in the British Embassy here 1 year ago, and I know that they were not aware of this kind of issue at that time. And I suppose that a lot of companies can face similar issues while importing or exporting to UK. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's that for? Is Anna? Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So yes, if you take goods out of, if you're trading under a free trade agreement and there's a UK-Serbia trade agreement, as soon as you move goods into the EU, you lose preferential origin. This is the direct transportation provision. The only way to maintain preferential origin is to keep the goods under constant customs supervision. And that looks differently depending on the agreement, but it will basically mean that if you have them in a private warehouse, that's the end of the preferential treatment. We've not seen anything specific done with that, with direct transformation in the different rollover agreements that the UK government has signed. There's quite a lot done in terms of rules of origin to allow, for example, EU content. If a Serbian producer uses EU content, that might still count for preferential origin purposes when exported to the EU under specific accumulation provisions if they're included in the UK-Serbia agreement. But this one, direct transportation, hasn't really been picked up by the UK government. Apologies for the light, the sun just came out. I think it's very exactly what you said. Is the question of whether or not the UK government realizes that impact on companies, and the answer here is I don't think that we're at this level of understanding yet. So long story short, I think you're absolutely right. That's something that is very likely going to happen.
Sorry for interrupting again, but I think that we have the same situation in all other countries in CEFTA region. So probably we'll have some allies there to raise this question with the UK and Serbia, both governments, and and other governments in the region who can maybe help if they are aware of this.
I think it's a question of understanding. I remember years ago, before Brexit, speaking to someone in the EU Commission, DG Trade, when they signed the agreement with South Korea, and them all of a sudden realizing that is a problem, for example, for small companies. If a company that cannot complete a full container, so if a number of small companies trade and the container needs to be unpacked in Singapore and container needs to be split, and some goods go under a preferential agreement to South Korea, that loses preferential treatment. They were not aware of that. I think government officials generally do not understand these kind of details when it comes to preferential trade. So if you can raise it with the UK government, then hopefully that will help.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to comment on that? No.
Yes, I would like to add something. Like Anna mentioned, if it is going through customs bonded warehouse in the EU, then you would not lose preferential origin with the proper documents. But I'm hoping that it will be the similar situation like we have in terms of Switzerland or in countries that are outside of EU, but that are in a CEFTA agreement or EFTA agreement. So there is a potential that you have a diagonal preferential origin that you can keep. If the Serbia-UK agreement is containing something similar, and then you might have a situation where you will not lose preferential origin, but it is only important if you're doing the re-export with some EU company. But if it's in transit, I don't think that it will make any impact on the origin for the Serbian or UK goods.
Sorry, but just to clarify, the diagonal accumulation is separate from direct shipment, so direct shipment would still apply.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It is only for the re-export when we speak about diagonal. If it's for transit, it does not.
Thank you. If anyone has any more questions, they want to put them on the chat or the Q&A in English or in Serbian if you prefer, and we can still put those questions to the panel. I'm just going to ask another question meanwhile, I guess of Anna, but Richard perhaps also, which is, let us assume for a moment that there is an agreement between the EU and the UK before the end of the year. Is the UK government assuming that all the sort of technical process behind that, the producing of the forms and the what it is you have to do, given that we don't know what's actually in that agreement yet, will be done? I mean, are they going to be ready? I mean, whether business knows what to do with them or not is another question, of course, but will they actually be ready on time? Do we assume that the governments know roughly what's going to be in the agreement, so most of this work can actually be done in preparation just to be tweaked when the agreement's done? Or is there a lot of practical work still to be done? Let's assume a deal is concluded, what, by the couple of weeks or sometime in November and signed off very quickly by eager politicians on both sides. Will we then, will everything be ready to go on time, or is that what the governments are assuming?
I don't even know how to answer this question. The short answer is no. There's absolutely no readiness in any of these areas. There's absolutely no understanding of what we need to do. And that's, I guess that's where we are right now. We're not ready for a deal. We're not ready for a no deal. We're just not ready. Even, you know, we're talking about forms. So yes, obviously, I mean, we're expecting that if there's a deal, the proof of origin will be provided on a commercial invoice under self-certification, because that's the general trend. But even something like the GSP, so the Program for Developing Countries, I've got companies from developing countries contacting me, asking me, do we finally have a form, a UK form for the GSP program? For the last year and a half, the UK government has been saying that we will maintain the same preferences for developing countries or grant them additional preferences. We'll definitely not cut anything. That is somewhere. We don't know where we are with this. We don't have any forms. So even for things that we apparently have known about for the last couple of years, we still don't have forms. The non-preferential origin forms for UK, I think, have been drafted. They're somewhere somewhere locked in a cupboard somewhere. But that's pretty much it. I don't think the government even understands what will need to happen if they have a deal. I just don't think we're at that level of a conversation. When we're talking about what the UK government is thinking and preparing for, the type of questions we're discussing in various stakeholders calls, border readiness calls, and so on, doesn't give me any sort of confidence to think that anyone in the UK government has thought this through. Again, a very positive answer.
Well, thank you for sharing this up. Anyone else want to comment on that? If not, I've got another question from Gradimir Stefanovic. Please unmute yourself or get yourself unmuted and talk to us. Still muted.
Now?
That's better. That's great.
Fine, thank you. We talk a lot about import, export goods, procedures with goods. I mostly focus on the services. So my company providing services based in UK, providing services to Serbia and other Western Balkan countries, non-EU member. What's change should be happen or no changes?
Thank you. Very, very, very simple question. I don't know whether there's a simple answer, but very simple question. Richard, Anna, I don't know.
I'll have an initial go, and Anna can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that there's likely to be less change. Looking at the scope of the UK-Kosovo continuity trade agreement, it does actually cover trade in services. And if you work on the assumption that the whole aim of the continuity trade agreement is to not to introduce any change, I'm not sure. I think my reading of that is that it would be that you don't, that there will be no change. But I'm ready to be stand corrected by Anna.
Anna, please.
I'm sorry. That sounds absolutely. I don't have any additional information. I focus on goods, so that sounds absolutely correct to me. But I wouldn't be in any position to add anything. And
certainly, I will go and clarify where the services aspect is heading, and we will flag it up if it looks as if it's a problem. Gradimir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Are there any other questions or comments? I'd be really interested if anyone would like to tell us about the problems they are expecting to face, or they're worried about, or there's something they're doing something about, whatever that might be. As well as questions to the panel, obviously very welcome questions to the panel too. So anyone else would like to say anything? I'm sitting here quietly, but the screen hasn't frozen, so if anyone would like to say anything further. If that's not the case, I'm hesitating just in case someone's formulating a question and about to press send on the screen. I don't know, I always find that takes time. But if it isn't the case, can I thank our panelists very much indeed, Anna, Richard and Mišo, for explaining to us as best anyone possibly could in the world at the moment, I think a very complicated situation. It's hard to take away huge amounts of positivity, except I suppose what I was just thinking at the end, and I think one of Anna's last answers, that this is clearly a problem that extends well beyond the Serbia-UK trading relationship. We do have a continuation agreement to conclude, and I repeat again, we urge both governments to conclude one quickly. But the challenges are much bigger than that. So we must hope that when the challenges are quite big and are going to affect quite a lot of trade across Europe, one way or another, because of the scale of the UK trading relationships, that something will get done to solve some of these challenges quite soon, because it's not just the small group of us attending this webinar who are affected. There's a great number of people who are going to be affected, a great number of businesses. I'm sure our governments wouldn't want that. So we must hope that is the case. Keep reminding them of the challenges ahead. Keep doing what we can, and I know you will let us know if there is more that you would like from us. If there's anyone on this call particularly who is not a member of the Chamber of Commerce yet, I hope that situation changes soon. And Richard in particular will be pleased to hear from you about that. But if you are a member and you'd like to pursue with us further and help us as well in articulating these arguments, please get in touch. And Anna, Richard, Mišo, thank you again for your time, and good afternoon. Have a good evening wherever you are. Thank you.